by the time this happens, AMD might look at poised to take most of the laptop market, again, be coasting their way to becoming a $1 trillion company. And in that world, I just think we're going to want Nvidia to be making sure Intel can compete with AMD still. And welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. This episode is brought to you by CDkeyoffer.com. Use offer code Broken Silicon to get Windows 11 Professional for $23. And then it is also brought to you by ZipRecruiter. Click the link below for free to show support for Moore's Law is Dead. And then it is also brought to you by my guest, Dan. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I have to wonder how Gerard will edit that intro now that I said, and it is also brought to you by my guest, Dan. I guess if you cut out the intro ad portion, I'll say something like, I'm your host, Tom, and brought to you by my guest, Dan. But it might sound weird, but just so you know, to the patrons that get this ad free, which I'm sure you're glad you do, and please consider supporting us on Patreon. There was like a couple weeks when we changed how we did the intro where we just left the intro ad in because it was 10 seconds. Few people very angry about that. So we changed that. So this is what you get now. A slightly awkward intro, and you don't get to hear about ZipRecruiter, which I will not cut out that I just mentioned them again just there. What if I muted myself every time I said ZipRecruiter?
This how about we just edit to like awkwardly, it's this podcast Dan, and that's it.
And this, yes, Tom, Dan, and then we just cut out. Yeah. Well, speaking of awkward, Carbon Cry writes in, and he says, first, let me open by saying Heineken is a war crime. Their group also effed up several low to mid-tier breweries in Czechia. Well, also those beers were meant. Now they've become awful, but every country has craft and good stuff. I agree with Tom on this. Only a few are mass-produced quality beers that can dominate export, though, and I think Czechia has the OG Pilsner, Urquell. Belgium has Stella Artois. I think I have. I don't think Stella's that great. No, and this is probably a good way for us to bait people into commenting a bunch for the algorithm. But I don't care if I am. I don't think Stella's that great. I mean, I would take...
It exists.
It's fine. I mean, is it better than Bud Light? Of course. Also, is it
better
than
Budweiser? I mean, I don't know. Budweiser...
I think so.
Budweiser is a fine piss beer.
I mean, here's what I'm going to say. I would choose Corona over Stella.
Sure.
Would you? I don't think that's considered a fancy beer at all. So but anyways, some countries though export their worst. However, US I do not believe is the worst. Oh man, he's going for some hot takes here. That would be Ireland. Look, it's not that Guinness is atrocious. It's just the pretentious snobbery of it and the theatricality and the image the brand has built. I do not think that is justified for what you're getting is an average dark beer. Shots fired. Now, this is, of course, the continued saga of people writing in corrections for which beers are good or not. And I will say, we're going to humor it one more time this episode, everybody. This is it. We're done opening every Tom and Dan episode talking about if it's okay to say Bud Light is bad, which the answer is, of course, yes. But here's what I will say, Carbon Cry.
I've had better stouts than Guinness.
And I think Guinness, you would agree, Dennis, I think obviously better than the other beers mentioned. I think it's better than Stella.
I would agree with that. But
having said that, it is not my first choice pretty much ever. I don't think it belongs up there with craft beers. And they've kind of made it feel like that.
No. It looks fun when you pour it though, especially the Nitro Guinnesses.
Yes.
So look, I like other stouts. Left-hand stout. Get that one instead. I'm also left-handed, so I'm supporting my people.
That's right.
Big lore revelation today. I don't know if I've ever said I'm left-handed before.
Well, and to left-hand stout, Dan's culture is not your costume. Let me say that, actually, in defense of you. Maybe you've internalized your left-handed hate.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I don't know if the owner of Left Hand is left-handed, and if he does not, I'm going to be a little pissed.
Well, you know what? He probably is. Maybe he's not. Write in below if you know
if you listen.
If you listen, if you haven't turned off this podcast by now. But that's it. We're done, I think, with the beer talk in the beginning. Everybody, you've been warned if you submit more of them, and it's been fun. But with that, let us move on to the actual corrections and omissions. Gar McCroy writes in and says, Tom, the 5090, I believe actually, despite what you said, is bandwidth limited. The memory bandwidth on paper is great. However, the internal NOC is very weak in comparison. You see, NVIDIA's L2 NOC is a crossbar going to each GPC. It seems this link was not sufficiently strengthened. So the 5090's very large GPCs might have similar bandwidth in effect to the 4090, which had smaller GPCs. This results in lower real bandwidth available per SM, longer latencies for transfers, and general underperformance of the memory system of the 5090. Basically, the memory supplies a lot of data into the L2 cache, but that data cannot get fast enough to the compute. And I think that was a worthy correction. And honestly, the way he describes this, and it's not the exact same thing, I'm sure, but it reminds me a little bit of the Theory X, where it had HBM, but HBM was kind of a band-aid on an aging architecture that they just made bigger from the 290X, which actually is very comparable to Blackwell over Lovelace, where they're like, we're just going to make it bigger, tons more teraflops, and we're going to try to make that okay by just putting an absurd amount more bandwidth. Because I don't want to say, you wouldn't say they're lazy, they didn't put as much thought into actually scaling the architecture effectively. Blackwell's just bigger Lovelace, and in fact, the 4090 has more ROPs than the 5090, just so everybody knows. And on that note, I would say it's almost like the 5090 isn't a card meant for gaming. I don't know. Might I suggest that? But speaking of cards that are potentially not for gaming, let us move on to the first story. Story number 1. Nvidia unveils Rubin CPX, and our sources are not sure that this is a 6090 like people are hypothesizing online, have hypothesized online. Quoting first from NVIDIA before the write-up, NVIDIA today announced the NVIDIA Rubin CPX. These press releases, why do they have to go the NVIDIA says the NVIDIA? But a new class of GPU purpose-built for massive context processing. Now that's worth purpose-built for massive context processing. This enables AI systems to handle million-token software coding and generative video and groundbreaking speed and efficiency. The Vera Rubin platform will mark another leap in the frontier of AI computing, introducing both the next-generation Rubin GPU and a new category of processors called CPX, said Jensen Huang, founder and CEO of NVIDIA. He continued, just as RTX revolutionized graphics and physical AI, Rubin CPX is the first CUDA GPU purpose-built for massive context AI, where models reason across millions of tokens of knowledge at once. All right, so here's what we literally know about Rubin CPX. It is one very large die, and it has 128 gigabytes of GDDR7. It has 20 dense NVFP4 petaflops, the same as Blackwell Ultra, which is 2 reticle size, and will launch at the end of 2026. This is a bit of an odd announcement, though, coming more than a year ahead of availability with fairly scant details. Rubin CPX really is a new class of AI GPU deeply optimized for a very specific part of the most modern models. It's not even just an AI card, everybody. It's an AI GPU, I should say, maybe not even a card. It's not just an AI GPU. It's an AI GPU built for a specific part of AI. Perhaps they're announcing it early, though, because they're spooked about AMD's progress, or perhaps they announced this GPU so early to make people get ready for it, make their customers prepare. The interesting question is, though, for our perspective, is this an RTX 6090 that they've teased very early? A lot of people on Twitter seem to think so if you look around. In fact, some even claim that they found evidence of ROPs and display blocks for video out in the die render, but marketing renders, people must remember, are not always meant to be accurate and therefore are often wrong to attempt to fully analyze a product. In fact, I must now read this quote here from a source at NVIDIA that I've been kind of preparing. I went back and forth on if I should read this, but I think after further conversations today with the source before we recorded, Dan, I'm willing to say it. So here it is. This comes from someone at NVIDIA. At least based on the Rubin architecture docs I've seen, I find it hard to believe that CPX is the die that'll be used for the RTX 6090. From what I saw, it's a monolithic chip with no video out that has no current plans to be paired with a separate media die. If it does end up getting a video out, like people are suggesting on Twitter, that was a recent addition as far as this person is aware, and that doesn't change the fact that the SMs are highly specialized for pre-fill and inference. And this is someone that was involved in the Rubin project early and went on and on with me, by the way, people, about how it was like literally built for one thing and they never brought up gaming. So, and truly, Moore's Law is Dead team members agree that there are actually way more red flags regarding this die being meant for gaming than some of the simplistic, from our opinion, analysis online has suggested so far. This chip has to condense FP4 compute of 2 dies into one. Okay, well, how would this die fit FP32 vector and RT cores to be suitable for gaming? For reference, Blackwell Ultra, after all, has about 70% the FP32 vector that the 5090 has, and yet it had to get 2 dies to the reticle limit combined to get to the same level of insane NVFP4 throughput. How would this all fit into the die size they just announced? Doesn't seem like it would. Additionally, as one of our sources suggested, the source I just read, having video out does not mean it can do gaming well. An example of a card that didn't have video out but could be forced to do traditional GPU tasks was A100 from the Ampere era. Linus Tech Tips tested it and found that it could do Blender almost as well as a 3090, which is way less than you would want for something that costs tens of thousands of dollars and use some massive die on TSMC 7 nanometer while they're using 8 nanometer for the other products. Anyways, though, so what is our point? People at NVIDIA who worked on Rubin early on state that it was never meant for gaming and, in fact, might be quite bad at it if you force it to, just like A100 was bad at doing normal GPU tasks if you forced it to before. In other words, if Rubin CPX is the die used for the RTX 6090, it's not an obvious conclusion that it is, based on what NVIDIA said so far. And again, a lot of people, I think, are hoping they can claim this is the 6090 for clicks, when what I've seen, what Carrie's seen, what Carbon Cry at Moore's Law is Dead has seen, what my sources at NVIDIA have seen, does not suggest this. And what I would say to that is, if it is a gaming card, if this does end up being the RTX 6090, I don't think it was obvious it was. And I would suggest NVIDIA is likely fundamentally changing how they render games again, like they did with Turing, except this time it would be an even larger departure than before. And by the way, it would probably run past games worse than the 5090. So I don't know. Maybe they'll do something crazy with neural rendering that triples performance and AMD's screwed. But that's kind of what you're suggesting if you say this is a 6090, according to both my sources at NVIDIA and the analysis the members of Moore's Law is Dead have done. So what do you think, Dan?
I mean, to me, so how many generations now have they had their own like AI specific architecture or architecture that they do for professional like AI acceleration? That's its own thing. Like this is the 3rd or 4th generation now, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly.
It depends how you count it, but they always have some variant or not.
Yeah, that the fact that it sounds like they're really accelerating their quarter precision. I don't know why you would think this is a 6090. There's just no reason to think it. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the extent of my thoughts on could this be a 6090. I think the answer is no. Like... Or 80% no, unless there's a radical redesign in how they've been doing things for the past several generations. And there's not a huge loss in performance for really going for AI acceleration.
Yeah, and I don't know how much did you read up on this before, or like look into the discussions online? Because I'm going to be honest, one of the main reasons this is in here is because like Carbon Cry and Carrie Nosugata at Moore's Law is Dead said this has to be a story. It's something I didn't even really pay attention to because I saw it and I was like, I don't know.
I mean, I didn't see that much, really see much about like the discussion of is this a 6090? I just read the press release because I don't know, maybe I'm insane, but I don't know why my assumption would immediately go to this is a 6090. Like, just everything about this seems like, oh yeah, this is the AI card that they just announced, that they announce every generation now, and they, I don't know, announced it a little bit earlier than usual, I guess, maybe, but that's about it. Like, and not that early, really. They oftentimes announce these like a year in advance, don't they?
Yeah, but
And
it's usually like 10 months in advance. It's not, well, I guess which that could be now, but this seems to be slightly over a year in advance or,
sure.
like even a little earlier than we've seen before. But it's funny, that to me sounds like you had a similar thought pattern to what I had, which is, oh, look, AI thing. And then you didn't pay attention to apparently a gaggle of people saying this is the 6090 online, to which, of course, a bunch of clickbait channels immediately said, oh, it has to be then because two people on Twitter did.
Yeah, and like if I'm wrong about that, I'll admit it. But like I just don't see the indication anywhere in this press release that this would be a gaming card at all.
Well, and that's why at least the working title for this episode has a parentheses around a question mark with the 6090 CPX leak, because
Mm-hmm.
it's like technically the sources I talked to, especially the one that was willing to be quoted for this that I put on screen, like isn't 100% sure, because they are not like they're not like in GeForce hard design final team.
Yeah.
Like, but this is someone that's worked on it, knows people that worked on it, and they're like, this doesn't fundamentally make sense to me. So I guess that's just what I want to say again to everyone is there's some people acting like this is obviously an Nvidia gaming card, probably because
Yeah.
they think they see video out. Number one, these renders are often just thrown together for a flashy thing on a PowerPoint. It doesn't mean it's the final design. Who knows? Maybe they'd even put that there to mess with AMD. Nvidia has done that before, and AMD's done stuff like that before. But number two, even if it has video out, it doesn't mean it's good at gaming. And based on what my sources at Nvidia know, who have worked on Rubin in the early stage of development, they're like, this wasn't built for gaming at all. It might lack fundamental parts of like a pipeline you would need to run some modern games, in fact. So like this isn't obviously for gaming, and they don't think it is. So I don't think this should be everyone's assumption right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I don't have like that as much technical know-how, but it's just like from a gut perspective, there nothing about this would make me think it's gaming. And I don't know, I guess it's weird that would have a uh video output possibly. I don't know why it would need that, but I mean,
Maybe there's a cut down version they sell and it can boot Windows and like run
yeah.
YouTube, but it's not really meant to do much more than that. Just so you can have that be the command
It,
GPU in your system. I don't know.
yeah, I guess. I'm also curious.
But think of how big the die is. I don't
Is
know.
there any possibility that like people are just mistaking this as
Yes,
a video?
always.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know. But again, so, and who knows, maybe I'll change the title to suggest that we're pretty sure. But this would be a big thing to get wrong. So it's like, unless I have three sources at NVIDIA telling me they're sure this isn't it, to which then they'd probably also be able to give me the specs for the actual 6090, to which I would save that information for a later video. Like that, that's what would make me say 100%. And maybe there will be a video that comes out in a week or two, and maybe I'll confirm exactly what's going on. But at least as of now, I don't have any evidence this is a 6090 is the best way to put it.
And I guess for me, it's more like if you think this is a 6090, the ball is more in your court to explain why than anything.
And just seeing something on a render that could just be for marketing they threw together doesn't count as your reasoning. Tell me from their press release where they say specifically built for this, multiple times, like how that tells you this is for gaming. And especially when everything I've heard from like AIBs is they kind of expect the cadence to be 2 years. So therefore 2 years after Blackwell would be early 27. Like literally what evidence out there is that this is a gaming card? And why did they announce it so early? Yeah, I don't know. Rodrigo Ferreira Maciel writes in and says, imagine a gun was up to your head and you had to answer this.
Oh, no.
Just say, put a gun up to your head. We know it's imaginary. If the AI market suffers a crash between today and the next generation of gaming GPUs, how do you think NVIDIA would segment their lineup in terms of price, and how would AMD answer? How do you see the market reorganizing itself? I honestly wonder if NVIDIA would start to take better care of the gamer market again, or they just try to follow up the next trend, considering how stubborn they have been with gamers recently, though. I wouldn't be surprised if they just straight up refuse to give us good deals ever again, especially at the low end. Love from Brazil. Rest in peace, 10,000, 1,000 series. right? Because those drivers are just discontinued. I'll say the AMD part first. How would they act? Oh, I think you would immediately see them pushing Strix Halo way cheaper. Like right now, it's kind of an AI laptop thing, and I think you'd see a much greater push, from that side from AMD. Now, and from the AI of Nvidia side, like I don't know, Dan, what would you expect them to do? Because my short answer was just, I don't know. I think you'd see another Maxwell. I think they'd have to do something with all of their capacity, and they'd be more aggressive with it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they would want to produce as many of these purpose-built AI cards unless they can be quickly repurposed for some other type of modeling that I'm not, aware of or knowledgeable enough about. Because I mean, I think if there's like a huge crash in the market, obviously, like to go to their the gold rush analogy, well, they've got a bunch of shovels that can't dig anything anymore. Then.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, to an extent, I think they would have to go back to the well of like professional cards for like rendering and gaming, which those can both be the same or similar architectures. So
Um,
yeah, I mean, I think they would have to pivot hard back into gaming, and you might have a couple awkward generations of GPUs.
yeah. And well, another thing, I think, I guess both, and I guess I already said this with AMD, but AMD and Nvidia would go for laptops super hard. I mean,
Oh,
I think
sure.
this is when you're going to see Nvidia push. Look, if it wasn't for the AI bubble, I think their N1X APU that this channel exclusively leaked pictures of, by the way, and specs early on, that would be out by now. That would have been
Maybe
out
we
maybe
would,
a year ago, honestly.
and maybe we would start getting some like actual 16 gigabyte graphics cards instead of however many generations of low end like 8 gigabyte cards we've had for what 4 generations now or whatever, however long they've been doing it.
Well, let me say that too. It's not just because they'd have to be more aggressive. Another reason Nvidia would probably give you more VRAM is informed by something they told me a while ago, which is the reason they kept giving the 4068 gigabytes, and they basically told me the 5060 would have 8 gigabytes a couple of years before it came out, is because they don't, that is their high volume seller, and as long as they
Mm-hmm.
can get away with not pulling from the supply for their professional cards, they're going to. So the second they have to sell less 128 gigabyte AI cards is the second they can take half of that supply and double the RAM on their cheap gaming cards. Like I think we would see much more VRAM in the lineups if,
Mm-hmm.
and I do think a lot of people don't get that. It's not just greed. It's like, oh, it only costs them $20 to add it. When you're someone like Nvidia that controls 80% of the market or whatever, you have to think about, if you double VRAM of 80% of the market, you run out of RAM for your AI cards.
Yeah,
That
true.
wouldn't be as much of a consideration for Nvidia. So at a minimum, tons more VRAM. All right. Well, let us get to what popped up and became, I think, easily the most important story of this cycle now, with story number 2. NVIDIA to make future Intel integrated graphics tiles. Quoting first from NVIDIA before a rather long write-up, as this is huge news with a lot to cover. NVIDIA and Intel today announced a collaboration to jointly develop multiple generations of custom data center and PC products that accelerate applications and workloads across hyperscale, enterprise, and consumer markets. For data centers, Intel will build NVIDIA custom x86 CPUs that NVIDIA will integrate into an AI infrastructure platform and offer to the market. For personal computing, Intel will build and offer to the market x86 system on chips that integrate NVIDIA RTX GPU chiplets. These new x86 RTX SoCs will power a wide range of PCs that demand integration of world-class CPUs and GPUs. NVIDIA will invest $5 billion too into Intel's common stock as a purchase price of $23.28 per share. The investment is subject to customary closing conditions, including required regulatory approvals. Yep. In a shock move, NVIDIA and Intel announced a partnership last week. And frankly, the big deals really were that NVIDIA would get to have custom x86 CPUs for their server chips now, but then also that Intel will be phasing out ARC in favor of NVIDIA IP. There was nothing said about NVIDIA using Intel's nodes, by the way. A lot of people were talking about that. In fact, when asked, Jensen Huang immediately highlighted advanced packaging allowing for combinations of chips made on different nodes, suggesting they still probably want to use TSMC. Although this collaboration was in the works for reportedly a year, and there are teams at both companies working on hardware for it that would have been aware of it, many at Intel only learned of it from the press release, including people on ARC's team, from what I was told. Like the executive side knew, but the ARC people didn't. Very bad sign for them. Well, NVIDIA people were aware of it for weeks, according to our sources, or years, depending on what part of NVIDIA they're at, as disclosed in the video. But anyways, what does this mean for Intel? Well, first of all, the investment gives them breathing room. Along with the previous SoftBank investment and the U.S. government transforming the CHIPS Act grants into stock somehow, and with the sale of a majority stake in Altera, Intel hasn't had more hard cash since 2021. For those who don't remember, this was during the 10 nanometer and 14 nanometer shortage, especially 14 nanometer shortages era, where they couldn't get enough revenue, or they couldn't make enough products and had tons of revenue. This is before the fall, though. They can also continue to wind down ARC as well as a second big bonus. The APUs with NVIDIA tiles are years in the future, but there is no future for ARC. So this allows Intel to safely cut spending and, with its reduced workforce, focus on the products that they need to make succeed, CPU. For NVIDIA, this is just as much about domination as it is about a failure. In consumer, NVIDIA is returning in a way to the MX market. For those who don't remember the MX 150 and 250 GPUs that really dominated budget in premium thin laptops for years. I had an MX 150 and an MX 250 laptop. I thought they were fantastic for the time, but then they canceled it in favor because they thought APUs were going to push them out. This seems like a way for them to get back into that segment. It is worth pointing out that NVIDIA did not abandon MX due to low margins. They abandoned it because MX was not able to compete with increasingly strong APUs, or at least they didn't think it would be able to. I think in hindsight, it might have been able to. But anyways, why go for x86 when NVIDIA has ARM server chips and ARM APUs already? The answer is that grace isn't enough for many customers, even in an AI system. NVIDIA is reportedly going with a custom core for the Vera ARM CPU, but Intel x86 is a good hedge. Intel might not be as good as AMD per core right now, but at the top end, when you need real performance, whether the ARM fanboys like it or not, ARM is still significantly behind even Intel x86 and high performance per core computing. And as for GB10 or N1X, the ARM APU that it's not canceled either. I also saw a lot of people saying, is the NVIDIA laptop APU canceled? It is not. But clearly something is wrong, so why not hedge in case that doesn't turn out well? Okay, so then, the question everyone probably has, when will we see results? When will we be able to get any of these Intel NVIDIA hybrid products? Well, for the server CPU with NVLink, it's possible that it might come as early as 26 or 27. NVIDIA postponed it as an alternative to their Rubin ARM systems, which will be releasing likely in late 26. But we're probably going to have to wait longer for APUs. We've already leaked that Intel's roadmap goes as such. Panther Lake early next year, Nova Lake late next year, Razor Lake the following year, then Titan Lake, and then Hammer Lake. And a day before the partnership was announced, clearly not a coincidence, we learned from someone in Intel that Titan Lake, the one that comes after Razor, which comes after Nova, may actually launch earlier, that they are pulling it up and reducing it to a mobile-only refresh. And then Hammer Lake is now redefined to have some mysteriously large iGPU, but this person, again, a day before the announcement, wasn't sure what it would be, and that confused them. Thus, yeah, we connected the dots and put out a leak about this. We are pretty sure Hammer Lake has an NVIDIA GPU in 2029, and maybe an earlier product like Titan Lake may get an early variant sooner in 28 or something, maybe even early 28. But we can only be sure of Hammer Lake at this point. Well, we can also be sure that ARC definitely seems to be effectively dead, but Celestial will probably carry on in budget laptops for quite some time. All right, Dan, what do you think about all of this?
I mean, leave it to Intel to make me excited about them again by having less Intel in them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for this to come out, even though it sounds like it's going to be a while. I hope it comes to Titan Lake rather than Hammer Lake, and we see this by like 2028 rather than
hopefully they have like a
2027.
NVIDIA Halo APU that competes with Zen 7 Halo. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, that would be good. And like we talk about like this benefiting Intel, but you know, it also does benefit NVIDIA a lot, as I think I don't know, the discrete market for this type of card, I think, is going to be pretty eaten up by AMD's APU offerings. So Nvidia at some point does need to figure out how to break into the APU market, whether it be through partnering with Intel like this or through their own ARM option, which, seems to
be
not be
having
doing well. Yeah. So I think this is a obviously smart partnership for both of them. And I'm excited to see what this turns out. Like, even if on the CPU side they're still flailing a little bit, if their architectures are at least reasonably power efficient, I think that partnered with an Nvidia for an APU could still be really good.
Yeah. Something that comes to mind that I want to clarify too from the video I put out last week is I saw, and I did think of this while I was rendering the video, like, there's going to be some people that point this out, but like, they're like, well, Tom, you're claiming to know that Arc was going to be wound down for years. And I mean, look, I just, let's call balls and strikes. In late 2021, I said Alchemist would have a messy launch. Battlemage would have a much more limited, drawn out launch over years, and it wouldn't meet the roadmap. That happened. And then Celestial would be lucky to get one low-end GPU. All of that has happened. But then they go, well, if you knew that and you say you have these great sources, what about this Nvidia X Intel thing? And it's like, well, yeah, I can know that Arc is winding down and that people in the Arc team are saying that Celestial was pulled from roadmaps, which is, we'll get to that in a second, from dedicated graphics roadmaps. That's separate from knowing that Intel would become so desperate that they would go to Nvidia. Right. Like, yeah, I don't need to know one to know the other.
And at the end of the day, like what you discussed in that video is basically what came to pass. It's just, I don't know, maybe you would have expected that to have occurred over the course of like 2, maybe 3 years rather than like 5, because Intel is so slow to get all these architectures out. Like, oh, yep, it's just a very, very slow car crash from Alchemist to Celestial.
Yeah, in some ways slow, in other ways actually quite a lot faster than I thought it would be. Like, I mean, I heard that they were going to push Pat out of the company if he became married to Arc. I don't know if that's why he got pushed out, but he did get pushed out. And then, but I didn't know that Raja would be fired in a year or whatever it was, and then Pat would be fired a year or two after that. And that I thought we would get a mid-range Battlemage by the end of last year, and we might not get it until, like, as we'll get to in the next leak, like, I don't know, November, December of this year.
We have B580. That's mid-range Battlemage.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Losing to a 5060 is mid-range.
Well, Tom, 5060 is mid-range. It has a 60 in it, so.
That's true. It doesn't matter how small
they make it. Which is basically
enthusiast,
if we're thinking about it.
Yes, if we're thinking about it, that is basically enthusiast graphics.
Raja Kaduri was right.
Raja Kaduri was right. Yes, and the people that shared videos of him looking like he was in a hostage video saying, yeah, it's going great. Those people are definitely, they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. I already, obviously, a major reason I put out a video about this wasn't just to leak what I knew about Hammer Lake. It was to directly address not just the impact of the information itself, but also something I want to touch on again here, which is the amount of people in the comments that said that this is horrible and that this is going to become AMD is going to go out of business. And in fact, let me read this question here from Falto. This piece of content is brought to you by CDkeyoffer.com. CDkeyoffer.com is really the best place to go to get reasonable pricing on Microsoft software, whether that's Windows 11 operating systems or Office products like the ones that I installed on this new Strix Halo laptop that I was testing while I made this ad. You see, I actually use CDkeyoffer.com. I've used them many times. My family members use them. My friends use them when they're building new PCs. And that's because they've been a reliable sponsor of Moore's Law is Dead for years now. And so if you're looking to get, say, a new laptop, or you just finally want to get a legitimate key of one of the latest Office products on your desktop during back to school, use CDkeyoffer.com's offer codes Broken Silicon to save 25% on all Microsoft products. And then actually you can also use offer code DieShrink to save 3% on everything else on their website, like games as well. Once again, I want to thank CDkeyoffer.com for sponsoring this content, like all the other content that they've sponsored, and for making it easy for me to get a good price on Office on my new laptop. Given the news of the partnership of Intel and Nvidia, what's the chance of Nvidia straight up buying Intel as a whole? I think in a dark twist of the current Galaxy Brain US administration, as long as Nvidia bribes them directly or indirectly, I think they'd be allowed to do whatever they want. Yeah, probably. But what I would say is if Nvidia wants to outright buy Intel, I think they'd be wise to do it in like 2028. Like rush out Titan Lake with an Nvidia tile in 27, see if it goes well, see if this thing they're doing shows promise. Like, are our teams working well with Intel? If they're meshing together very quickly and very well, and Intel keeps getting weaker and cheaper, then maybe you do try to buy Intel. But this could be like a pilot program into seeing if it's worth buying Intel. And then also you're going to want to do that in 2028 because that's when you'll still for sure be able to bribe the current corrupt U.S. administration. But it's not just because of that. It would also be, in my opinion, like do it then, not now, because I'm sorry. I think by 2028, and this is an argument, a point I make in the video is by then AMD may be on track to be like a $1 trillion company that some people think is dancing on the grave of Intel. And that's where I don't know what the monopoly argument really is, because
whether AMD or whether it's better for the market if there's like a duopoly that's controlled by Nvidia and AMD, or if
it's not a duopoly. Qualcomm makes their own CPUs and graphics. True. Apple makes their own CPUs. Look, I'll just argue in front of the Supreme Court right now. Like you could just, or in front of the FTC right now, I could just do it. Like I could say, wait, why is this a monopoly? AMD is a $1 trillion company. They make their own graphics. They make their own CPUs. In fact, they almost have a monopoly in all console production.
And maybe
that's a stronger argument if Intel's weaker, though.
And maybe there is a real argument for it. Like, well, AMD being the only x86 game in town is probably worse than Nvidia also having an x86 license that they get through the purchase of Intel.
Exactly. Because the people that say AMD's screwed, the people that say Nvidia buying out part of Intel and making their graphics, bolstering themselves as like a mega APU competitor in laptop is going to hurt competition and run AMD into the ground. I don't think that's what's happening or what's going to happen at all. AMD right now, from everything I've heard behind the scenes, is on track to start a rout in laptop market share against Intel. I mean, what I've heard about next gen, I think Lisa Su has already announced that their CES or whatever presentation is going to be all about the next era of APUs and graphics. I'm sorry, that's her hinting, in my opinion, at what they're going to do, sharing chiplets between APU and GPU. And once they start doing that, I think OEMs are going to be on board. I think they're going to rapidly take market share. And these NVIDIA Intel APUs are not going to be out until like 28 at the earliest. So AMD is going to keep taking market share this year, next year, year after. I mean, by the time this happens, AMD might look at poised to take most of the laptop market, again, be coasting their way to becoming a $1 trillion company. True. And in that world, I just think we're going to want NVIDIA to be making sure Intel can compete with AMD still. And they're still both going to be competing with Apple chips and Qualcomm, and to a degree, I guess, Samsung. Like, there are other competitors. I don't think this is going to be the death of competition. I think anyone who makes that argument is still thinking of Intel as a healthy company.
Yeah,
They're not. They're not.
Yeah, and it's not bad to remember that this will be likely what? I mean, maybe it might be like two full upgrades after, or at least one full upgrade after Medusa, and maybe a refresh or two even beyond that. So
right. Think about this. As far as I can tell, Panther Lake is not impressing OEMs. Its integrated graphics on paper have good performance. They just don't think the drivers will be good until I don't quote this. They're worried that it will be months to a year after launch when Panther Lake's drivers actually work for their graphics. Again, that's not an exact quote. That's me estimating what their sentiment is. And if that happens, let's say AMD is going to run away with the market next year, and then in 2027 you're going to have Medusa Halo with nothing. Basically, I know that there's going to be a Celestial Halo supposedly, but who knows? Maybe that's canceled by now. I don't think that's going to beat Medusa Halo. And so AMD is going to continue to run away with this market. And then we're going to get to Zen 7 Halo in like we might get to Zen 7 Halo early 28 before Titan Lake's even out. Like, you might even have a year of Zen 7 Halo battering an old Celestial design. I think, again, I could be wrong. And look, I'll still be doing this, I bet, in 5 years. So maybe we'll look back and you can clip me and say, oh, AMD instantly went out of business. I don't think so. I think AMD is going to run away with the x86 market over the next 3 years. And you're going to be praying for Nvidia to help Intel more by the time this happens. Will AMD be as big as Nvidia? I don't think so. But I watch out. I think that this is a necessary thing to make sure a failing x86 company stays competitive. And who knows, if it goes well, maybe eventually Intel can take a swing at graphics again. But they can't right now. They don't have the money. They need to focus on CPU. And so everybody, I want you to tell me what the alternative would be, because the Arc is, I've told you, and I've been right about it every step of the way. Arc's effectively been canceled. It's been effectively canceled. It's been dying a slow death, like I said it would, for years. Without Nvidia, what do you guys want to happen? Because the alternative is Intel is just out of APU. Nvidia tries to make their own APUs with crappy ARM CPUs, and AMD probably just takes more laptop market share with less competition. Like, I think that is a good way to put it. An alternative to the doom and gloom over this is, well, what do you think the alternative is? Qualcomm makes GPU tiles because they seem to suck.
Yeah, I mean, especially if AMD really does start improving in the AMD in the APU market, Jesus, because I mean, at a certain point, 3 years from now, I could see APUs like butting up against like even the mid-range laptop market rather than
they already are. It's as fast as it's almost a 50,
true.
60 or something, right? I mean,
maybe like the middle of the mid-range, like at a certain point, I could see them being more against like the
60,
I don't know,
70 or whatever.
Yeah, 60, 70 class of GPUs.
Well, that was the original plan. Strix Halo was supposed to compete with the 4070.
Yeah, and it was
delayed a year. You know, if they get that on track, they will be in the mid-range. And that could affect it. I mean, again, the alternative is what? Everybody, NVIDIA's GPUs get mostly pushed out of laptop. Intel loses the majority of laptop market share. AMD becomes a laptop monopoly. I mean, I wish there was another smaller company that Intel could buy to make GPUs so there was more competition that way. But this is what we got. And I think this is much better than the alternative universe. That's what I think. Let me see here. Falto writes in, another question on the NVIDIA Intel partnership. Does this mean that NVIDIA will not try to compete with their own upcoming ARM APUs anymore? No, they've got Vera CPU. The GB10 is not canceled. I think it's CES they're going to announce, or who knows, maybe they'll try a quarter 4 launch. I've heard mixed things, but it's probably CES. They'll show off N1X laptops. Like, no, I think what you're going to see out of NVIDIA is either they keep competing, and they're going to keep competing for the next couple of years with their own APUs, or they just buy Intel, and then that's what they do. You know, Techno writes in, with Intel wanting chiplets, do you think NVIDIA will switch to chiplets on GPUs too? Well, N1X already uses chiplets, so I don't think they're going to completely fundamentally change how they do their entire lineups, but they're already going to have a chiplet APU next year, and I think it's not unreasonable to think that maybe some of their low-end stuff would use chiplets. Although, again, NVIDIA is so high volume. That's why they don't use chiplets as much, from what they told me, is they can yield them into, take the yields and turn them into so many different products per die that they don't really need the economy you would get from chiplets yet. But eventually, I mean, yes, I think they will to a degree. I think they're always probably going to have some monolithic mid-range stuff, a monolithic low-end thing, but eventually, I mean, look, they're already doing it with N1X. Wouldn't you agree? And eventually they're going to use chiplets to a degree.
Yeah.
I think so. But they don't feel rushed to. That's for sure, because they keep making so much goddamn money doing things the way they're doing. So why would we, give them any advice? All right. Let us move on then to story number 3. Battlemage B770 launch leak. Launch information leaked. Sorry. All right. Alongside the Hammer Lake leak last week. Wow. Amazed I said that correctly. What a tongue twister. Couldn't even say half of the sentences in the first story. We also updated information on B770. Let us be clear. We do not think you should buy Battlemage. Celestial will be used in APUs for a long time, probably reminiscent of the Skylake iGPU era, where that was great at first and then just kept getting rebranded over and over and over into budget products, but with very solid driver support. But that's not probably what's going to happen with Battlemage. Battlemage is only in Lunar Lake, and so far 2 dedicated GPUs, maybe 4 total. which cost Intel more to make than the revenue they get by selling them. Celestial is going to be in a ton of different APUs. Even Alchemist is still used in Arrow Lake integrated graphics for some reason, in addition to more dedicated graphics that have been sold than Battlemage has been sold. So we believe long-term Celestial, then Alchemist, then Battlemage will get good driver support in that order. We do believe Battlemage will be the ugly stepchild of the ARC group, being the last dedicated group in very low volume to be made before switching to Nvidia for their tiles. But anyways, it is supposedly going to come out still. What will the B770 look like? Well, Big Battlemage, we're laughing because it's funny to call it big, considering its performance, will get 32 Xe cores, 16 gigabytes of GDDR6, and should trade blows with the RTX 4070, a last-gen mid-range card. Also, we were specifically told that it is expected to have bad frame pacing issues they are not sure they will be able to solve before launch. So a 4070 running at 100 frames will probably feel better than a B770 running at 100 frames, calling into question if it's really a 5060 competitor, honestly. But it is coming supposedly by the end of the year, although we have to say that Intel claimed that G31, the die used in this GPU, would have come out a year ago. So even though we're told it will come out this year, we still never really know anything for sure with Intel. By the way, G31, the die in B770, was developed before G21, what is in the B580. And yet the B580 came out first. Why is this? Well, from what I am told, G31 had so many flaws in the silicon, in addition to overhead issues that were made worse with a stronger card, that it was forced to be delayed 1 to 2 years. And they even held the B580 that could have supposedly launched at the end of 23, early 24, I believe it was, but it came out the end of 24 because they wanted a simultaneous launch. And the G31 kept having more and more problems. And eventually the B580 came out almost a year late, but still before the B770. That's how much chaos is going on there. Oh, yeah. And while Celestial looks potentially promising in terms of raw performance for an APU, Celestial dedicated graphics has been pulled from all roadmaps our sources have access to. All right, Dan, what do you think about the B770, the card I feel like we've been talking about for 3 years?
I mean, a more fraught die than what's used in the B580. Not super excited for it, I guess. What did we have to say about the B580 when it came out? At least it's improved on some of the issues that Alchemist had. And I don't know, maybe we'll be right back to those same issues again with the B580. So, I mean, B770. So, not looking forward to it, but, hoping I'm surprised and there is actually an improvement over the B580 with driver issues, but don't know why I would bet on that.
Yeah. Guessing you don't have really much else to say about this thing.
Nope. If it's offers great value and doesn't have issues, I guess cool. Don't think that's going to happen though.
Yeah. I mean, it's to the point where I could have done a full leak slide, could have done a full video on it, but it was just a footnote in the Hammer Lake leak, basically. And I didn't even redo the leak slide from a year ago. I just crossed out things and wrote the changes because only like 10% of it's changed. And just looking at the slide, the things that changed just kind of weren't good. It's coming out a year later than expected. 5.0 support was canceled. Frame pacing issues added on. It's like, so there it is. Everything I said a year ago, pretty much the same. Where was it a year ago? From that? Yeah, it was a year ago. Jensen Wang, all will be NVIDIA, although he spells it AIL for AI, all will be NVIDIA. I don't know, guys. Given the announcement so far, has NVIDIA selling Intel a GPU tile? Do you think some versions of Xe will be continued to be developed for the cheapest and lowest end Intel CPUs? Yes, I do. I think at least short term, Celestial, it is going to come out in tile form. Who knows? Maybe there'll be some budget Celestial D GPU. I don't know. And I wouldn't even be surprised if there wasn't some die shrunk version of Battlemage that they call Druid with slight tweaks. And then they just make that as their budget thing on their own node as an optional budget tile. I mean, you could see that happening. You could see like the i9, Ultra 9, or whatever chip get an NVIDIA GPU, and you have to pay extra for that. but then like a budget version with the worst yields gets paired with some budget Celestial tile, and then their desktop chips, that don't only need an iGPU for video out, get the Intel one that's cheap. Yeah, I mean, I could see that going on for a while, couldn't you, Dan?
I mean, sure. Like we have to remember, this isn't coming out for a while, so like they're going to have to bridge the gap anyways, and they're going to be releasing SoCs of some variety that use Intel graphics for probably the next 2 to 4 years. Then,
Yeah. Carbon Cry writes in, Tom, you've often said that ARC is effectively canceled. Now that ARC has finally succeeded and is set to become a brand for high-end GPUs, that is an Nvidia AIB from what we can tell, are you finally ready to eat some humble pie? Well, obviously this is a joke question, but I'll just briefly say two things. Number one, again, I think there were some people saying that Intel Arc was going well. Again, I'm not going to name names, so I just don't see a point in it. But they like to make themselves out as some super educated, smart authority on Intel tech, even though they get everything wrong over and over and over. Wrong, 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 always wrong. And then they, hate on this channel. And there's multiple people on Twitter that do that. So it's not like it's a specific person. But these types of people, I think they have good Intel sources because they have a marketing rep and they can message Tom Peterson, who's lied to you all for years. So I just want to say that to these people. You don't have good Intel sources because a marketing shill told you what you wanted to hear. That's not a good
yeah,
source. You need to talk to people in upper management, leadership, and the actual engineers working on the products. Actual engineers that can sometimes get me access to things that these other people with supposedly great sources do not have. Like that's the real thing. The people who are actually working on the product, that's who you want to talk to. Not a marketing shill who says, yeah, Battlemage is totally launching in 23 and Celestial's 2024, and we should all believe this. And I just think there's a lot of people that think they have access because they do access journalism. Access journalism is not actual access to the truth. It's access to what
that's what they
Intel
want.
wants you to vomit for them as a marketing shill. And there's a lot of people that shamelessly did this for years, and now they're wrong. And I just think you should really all take note of who that was because they do access journalism. Access journalism, that's not journalism. That's point number one. Point number two, I'm actually pretty optimistic about at least talking about Intel over the next few years. As I believe me and you, Dan, have said this, or you said this, Dan, like, why would we get excited about a company until it stops acting like the previous company that made tons of mistakes and that ran itself into the ground? And we're now talking about an Intel with different management than a few years ago, with a different roadmap than a few years ago, that seems to be focusing on the important things, unlike a few years ago. They're not focusing on a graphics division that clearly is going nowhere. They're focusing on trying to get x86 back on track and working with as many companies as possible, including Nvidia. And so I'm actually pretty optimistic about Intel now. Look, Nova Lake's going to have to be really good to prove they're out of the woods. It's good, and frankly, you're going to need to see Panther Lake be at least okay, and then Nova Lake be good, and then Razor Lake be good. Like you're going to need multiple generations, right, where things are good. But assuming Nova Lake turns out well, I think we're seeing what we need to see to maybe call the bottom in Intel soon. And then that just frees us up to get excited again, kind of like how we got excited about AMD before Zen 1, where AMD was done making claims about things that didn't pan out and pretending they did pan out. They were done trying to make products that would go nowhere. And they were just like, you know what we're going to do? A good x86 CPU. And that's what's going to be our focus. And then everything will follow after that. I'm starting to get that vibe from Intel right now, where the leadership admits where they made mistakes. Liputan is honest, says they've got a long ways to go, and they've shed the parts of the company they need to be able to focus on what matters, and that's x86 CPU. So I don't know about you, Dan, but I'm actually pretty excited about the future of Intel all of a sudden.
I mean, I'm still gonna be skeptical of them for a while. I think. I mean, I think there's early indicators that they're moving in the right direction, but like I said, they're early indicators. I don't. It's hard for me to say you can point to a trend this early on yet. So I don't know. I guess cautiously optimistic would be the way I put it, but I want to see. I don't think I'm gonna allow myself to be really excited about anything with them for at least a year, if I'm being honest.
But doesn't it, at least to you, if I
This
may,
could be the bottom. I mean, it could be.
doesn't it already feel like it's going to be more fun to talk about them?
Yeah. I mean, there at least something is changing at a
Because
minimum.
because for me, it's like, as long as they continued to like say Arc is doing great, when they said Battlemage would launch in 23 and Celestial would launch in 24, and then they never updated that roadmap. Technically, I think that's still their official Arc roadmap, and they want us to take them seriously. The fact that that at least is gone
Yeah.
tells me, well, at least now maybe we can take them seriously. And I don't want to just talk about AMD and Nvidia when Nvidia is usually just how much money they're making, not even good gaming products. Like, I want to be able to talk about multiple companies, and I think it's going to be a lot more fun moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
All right. On that optimistic note, let us move on to another optimistic story. Maybe, I don't know. I don't think that was a good transition, but it is the one. Sometimes you don't get the transitions you want, you get the ones you need. And sometimes we need a clumsy transition, and we
Sure.
need me to just move on so that we don't lose viewers. With story number 5. Full PS6 specs leaked. All right, now let's turn to consoles. We have finally finished the second half of our proper PS6 leak, revealing the Orion SoC powering the PS6 full home console, a 280mm squared 3nm die made at TSMC with up to 54 RDNA 5 CUs, possibly with 2 of those disabled for consistent yields, up to 8 Zen 6C cores, possibly with 1 disabled for consistent yields, 2 low power cores for running background tasks in the operating system to free up the main gaming CPU cores for more performance. And yeah, I mean, look, all of this looks a lot stronger than the Canis handheld chip. However, was covered in the video, if Canis targets 1080p 60 gaming, which it likely will, Orion should have no issues scaling up to 4K 120 because, and I think this is something people miss, 1080p 60 is 1/8 the pixels per second of 4K 120. Even if Canis targeted 1440p 60, I think what you'd still be looking at like 1/5 the pixels. So it's easy to see how they could scale these between each other, especially because, as we leaked with Canis, which supposedly have 24 or 36 gigabytes of RAM, it also is likely, according to our sources, and of course the documents that show the memory bus with a 160-bit GDDR7 bus, that Orion will get 30 or 40 gigabytes of RAM, meaning 24 with the handheld, 30 with the home console, or 36 and 40. The problem with the Series S was not teraflops. It was the RAM difference between the consoles. These consoles have a much closer amount of RAM, and that is almost certainly for AI, as according to what we are hearing, Sony sees AI as the next-gen feature for PS6 to distinguish it from the previous generation. Now, in terms of raw performance, we expect 2.5 to 3 times the raster of the base PS5, which would mean roughly double the raster of the PS5 Pro, or 6 to 12 times the ray tracing compared to the base PS5. Now, note, 6 to 12 is not an estimate or a range of where we think it will be. 6 times would be like worst case scenario light ray tracing. 12 times would be if you turn on path tracing, where the PS6 would more easily flex its ray tracing muscle. Speaking of ray tracing, this was by far the most controversial part of the leak, as we likened the ray tracing performance of Orion to the ray tracing performance, at least in the ballpark, of a 5090. But that does not at all mean that we think the PS6 will hit 5090 performance. We said ray tracing, not overall. Orion is overall weaker in raster, much weaker, in fact. Half the rasterization performance, which is a significant, if not most of the pipeline of the rendering, meaning that outside of edge case scenarios, no, this will be closer to like a 5080 or something most of the time. Heavily ray traced, maybe it'll be at a 5080. Not heavily ray traced, lose to a 5080. We do believe a lot of people saw the headline, didn't read it correctly, and didn't watch the video and misquoted us. Hopefully that settles that. Now, let's compare this then to the performance of Xbox Magnus, the APU powering, well, the next-gen Xbox. Magnus should be about 25% stronger, roughly. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less. But we have to point out, Xbox is usually faster on paper. The Xbox One X was 45% faster than the PS4 Pro, and the Xbox Series X was only 16% faster when you average everything that went into it than the base PS5 on paper. Yet the PS5 traded blows with the Series X, actually on average beating it. And the Xbox One X was definitely usually faster than the Pro, but there were multiple games where overall image quality and frame rate were roughly equivalent. So this is a little worse of a difference than the Series X and PS5, but much less than the Xbox One X. Therefore, we expect that most games will probably feel pretty similar between the consoles. Of course, with exceptions. Magnus might run a somewhat full Windows operating system. Therefore, it might be able to do 240 hertz gaming, especially much easier with its full Zen 6 cores. It has a few of those. On PC, it might actually have 240 hertz options that PS6 doesn't have, but PS6 is meant to be used with a TV. Anyways, going to the price. For the price, if launched today, we expect $400 to $500 for the PS6 portable and $550 to $700 for the Orion console. Note that is without a disk drive, so that would be, even at $550, a arguably like $80 price increase over what the PS5 is. I'm not saying it will cost the same. I'm saying it will cost marginally more. But we have to say, that's today's pricing. As we're going to get to in a second, Xbox just raised pricing again. So look, my overall quote, the thing I keep saying, I believe the PS6 base console without a disk drive will cost less than the PS5 Pro. Right now, I believe the PS5 Pro's MSRP is like $750. So where do I think the PS6 base will land? Yeah, I don't know. Without a disk drive, $650, maybe $599, maybe $580, $570, $569. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm feeling it's going to be. But if in 2027 the Series X is $1,000, yeah, I don't know. Maybe then it'll be $800. I don't know.
Yeah, if we're to Brazil levels of tariffs, who the hell knows?
Of tariff, yeah, which Brazil has enormous tariffs and a lot of inflation. Yeah, I mean, so I don't know, but that's what I would say. I'd still say I think this is going to cost less than the PS5 Pro, which today would mean $550 to $650 or $700 probably. But if the PS5 Pro is $900, yeah, I don't know, maybe it'll be $800. Let's hope that's not what happens. But anyways, what do you think about the PS6 stand? This was what I would have thought would have been the biggest story of discussion today if it weren't for that Nvidia Intel stuff.
I mean, I'm excited for the PS6. I think I think ray tracing is going to be a big part of the PS6. So, like, I don't know. I'm very excited to see, that advertised, because I mean, you talk about it not being as strong as the 5090, and obviously it won't be. But I do think you're going to see a lot more emphasis on ray tracing with this next generation of consoles, and because of that, PC gaming as well. So I don't know. We might be getting a meager performance in raster for gen over gen.
Still
but
triple.
True. But it depends on the generation. I guess that's not like completely outside the ballpark of what's normal. A bit on the lower end, but like, yeah, if there's a huge increase in ray tracing, and I expect ray tracing to be a bigger part of next gen, that's still a pretty good uplift in performance.
Yeah, and I mean, I just want to hit this point that I hit in the video again too. When it comes to performance, you don't always get double to or even double, let alone 10x the performance some people are expecting every generation. I mean, the PS5 didn't even double RAM over the PS4. The PS4 had 8 gigabytes of GDDR5, but then it also, I believe, had a quarter gigabyte of DDR3 or something for background tasks. None of that with the PS5. The PS5 just pulled from the main pool of RAM. So technically it didn't even double RAM. Whereas the PS4 was like, 16 times the RAM of the PS3? Because Mark Cerny said that's what we need, more RAM. That's not what he said with the PS5. He said we need enough RAM, not more RAM, not mountains.
Although the
more.
PS5 also has way better I/O than the PS4, which does make up for that a little bit, I suppose.
Besides not having a background CPU, though, for the OS.
True.
They actually had to pull away from the cores. But yeah, also its CPU, even with that, was like 8-10 times faster. I don't remember what the GPU was. I want to say it was like, oh God, it was actually pretty shocking. They felt like 8-10 times faster. But that's because that's what they needed. So think about that, like 8-10 times faster than the PS4 is what the PS5 got you with its GPU. Right. So, but that's raster, and it added ray tracing, but we didn't have ray tracing before. So now maybe you'll get 3 times or 2.5 times the raster. But you might get 12 times the ray tracing. That's a bigger ray tracing uplift than you get, with like the raster uplift in the previous gen, because that's what Mark Cerny thinks you should work on this time. And, the CPU seems like it's going to be, I don't know, at least twice as fast. Yeah, I mean, because it's kind of like RAM this time. Like before, Mark Cerny thought you needed almost double the RAM. This time he thinks you need about double the CPU, but not more than that. And that's just how this works. I think there's a huge misconceptions going around about what these the specs mean. And when I look at Xbox Magnus especially, but then also to a lesser extent the PS6, to me this looks like actually a standard, if not a bigger leap. Brian Heemskirk was just on. He's a game developer. He thinks this leap is going to be bigger than the previous gen. So there's
Oh
no
yeah,
reason to not be excited.
yeah. I could see it easily being as far as like what people actually notice this being a bigger leap, and it's just hard for people to conceptualize that right now.
Yeah.
Because ray tracing to some extent is still an afterthought, I think, in a lot of people's minds.
Finding great candidates to hire can be as time-consuming as sorting through the nonsense being quoted as leaks on rumor websites. You're always waiting for the right candidate to apply, sorting through resumes, trying to get in touch with potential candidates, and frankly, finding candidates that aren't just good, but then also actively looking for jobs at the same time that they are qualified. Well, the good news is that the future of hiring looks a lot brighter than the future of some of these rumor websites, and that's because ZipRecruiter's latest tools and features help you speed up and find the right people for your roles, so you save valuable time. That's right, this piece of content is sponsored by ZipRecruiter, and you can try it out for free at ziprecruiter.com/work. And you really should, because with ZipRecruiter's new advances, you can easily find and connect with qualified candidates in minutes. And if you see a candidate you're really interested in, well, you can unlock their contact info instantly. Plus, over 320,000 new resumes are added to ZipRecruiter monthly, which means you can reach more potential hires and fill roles sooner. So support Moore's Law is Dead by using ZipRecruiter and save time hiring. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. And if you go to ziprecruiter.com/work right now, you can try it for free. Again, you will be supporting Moore's Law is Dead. It'll cost you nothing, and it will save you time. ZipRecruiter.com/work. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Deadeyes117 writes in and says, "Hi guys. I have a theory I want your opinion on. I think with next-gen consoles, we will see a lot more games having mandatory ray tracing on all platforms to get away from having to develop costly raster fallbacks. I think the trend that we might see is 60 and 120 FPS modes on the PS6 and the handheld, but the handheld obviously with much lower resolution. And then we will just get a 30 FPS mode on the PS5. But here's the kicker. I'm wondering if the devs are even going to bother with Xbox Series X and S. We've already seen loads of titles strip out ray tracing on the Series S. Yeah, I didn't realize that. That's true. They just strip out the feature entirely. At the point where it's last gen and never had great sales to begin with, I see a lot of devs potentially just deciding it's not worth the effort to make a whole raster art pass for one version, and then both series consoles may not get support, let alone before we discuss the idea that there may be compatibility issues between a Windows PC version of Xbox that requires Play Anywhere or not. I just wonder if they're going to say get it on PC or get it on the next gen Xbox, which would be on PC, and they will abandon the previous gen. So, Deadeyes, I actually asked 2 game developers about this before we started recording, and one of them just got back to me. One of them says, I don't know what else to say other than I agree with your fan. Xbox didn't have a big enough user base to warrant people targeting it. If Xbox updates their policy on Series S so you can just target the X, maybe then we would do it on that. But if they require S, yes, I think future ray tracing titles that are built ray tracing first will probably just abandon Xbox and maybe still be on PS5. And then here's another guest that says it will depend on the engine, basically. That if it's Unreal has a very easy to use toggle between hardware ray tracing and Lumen software ray tracing. And you could just, and some games are doing this, turn off hardware ray tracing, turn on worse software ray tracing, and then warp down that resolution to 720p and throw it on Series S, and you could probably get it to work. But then I asked, but do you see this though? Could you see like maybe PS5 Pro getting a port of a PS6 game that's 1440p 60 or something, and then or 1080p 60 by then, who knows? And the PS5 gets like a 900p 40, and then everything else gets like nothing. And he said, yeah, the engine choice is going to matter. If it's Unreal Engine or something like that, where it's a toggle, they'll probably still support the Xbox. However, if it's something bespoke where they built it with ray tracing from the ground up, then yeah, they'll probably just not put it on Xbox, and to a degree, maybe not PS5, depending on how hard it is to run. So I don't know if you have any thoughts for that. I thought that was an interesting answer from devs.
No, I mean, just as far as popularity goes, like I think that's the big question: is it even worth porting to the Xbox a lot of the time? And I don't know. Depending on how big of a mandate they have on it having to work on both the Series X and Series S, I could see it not really being worth it a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I could easily see it going into the dustbin, or the Xbox going into the dustbin because it's just not worth developing for.
Okay, let's see. Techno writes in, how will Sony do 40 gigabytes on a 160-bit bus? That would imply 64 gigabit modules, or are they going to do double-sided 32? Yep. If they go to 40 gigabytes, that would be both sides would be populated with the latest memory.
Mm-hmm.
And to those who say they can't do that, that's what they did with PS4. They went to the limits of GDDR5, I believe, for when the PS4 launches. The PS4 launched in 2013. That would have been 290X.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the 290X didn't get 8 gigabyte models until those modules came out.
Yeah.
So yeah, Sony used cutting edge GDDR5 and with the PS4, and that was a $400 console. We'll have to see what they do with PS6. But I think it's going to be 30 or 40 gigabytes from what developers tell me. 30 is enough. You know, you're getting to a point where basically you can scale up the raster a bit like they are. You have enough to add the ray tracing, and then you can do a really, really weak AI model if you needed to. However, all developers I speak with say if they want this to feel truly next gen, they should go with 40 gigabytes, which I would hope they do, and 36 for the handheld. I also like that because it's only a 4 gigabyte difference between them. Again, even if they have to charge $700 and $600 for the handheld, and then $600 for the handheld, $700 for the home console, giving it 40 and 36 gigabytes, I think would future-proof this to be pretty incredible.
Yeah, and like if you're skeptical of Sony or any console maker being cutting edge, like I mean, it happens. I think especially with Sony, they're not necessarily the most use the most powerful implementation of a technology, but yeah, they're pretty cutting edge a lot of the time. So I don't know why that would be unbelievable to you.
Techno writes in yet again, and he says, when should we expect the PS6 handheld and Switch 2 modding jailbreaks to happen? Because I just can't wait to play Switch 2 titles more smoothly on my PS6 handheld. Pokemon Z-A on PS6 handheld would be awesome. Probably never. And I did actually look into this before we started recording. I'm sure someone in the comments on YouTube will find some link to someone who claims to have hacked a PS4. I know there's like emulators and some versions of the PS4 that have been hacked, but I could not easily find a PS4 that's been hacked to run Xbox or Switch games or something. So I think 15 years would be the minimum, and probably never.
And I'll say, based on how Sony has responded in the past to jailbreaking consoles, I hope they don't for a while, because Sony can be a bit much about that.
Yeah.
Talking to you, PS Vita.
Yeah. Well, let's not get into the Vita.
I got to get me one for the car.
I got to get me one. Never forget the heavy-handed marketing of House of Cards.
The most heavy-handed marketing I think I've ever seen in a TV show.
A politician running for president or something. Is that a PlayStation?
He just loves
Vita?
God of War, Tom.
He loves God of War, and he loves to play it like a crazy person who's clearly not playing it. And he says, "Is that a PlayStation Vita?" And he like looks at the camera. Did you know that's almost as fast as a PS3? I got to get one for the car. I'm never going to forget it. Never going to. I can't. It's etched in my memory. This is one of the most insane things I've ever seen. Good news is that was the last bad thing Spacey did. Anyways, though.
Yep.
Nothing else to say. Moving on to story number 5. Microsoft is raising prices again on the Xbox consoles in the US. Quoting from Microsoft, beginning October 3rd, we will update the recommended retailer pricing for Series S and Series X consoles in the United States due to changes in the macroeconomic environment. Whatever those changes are. We understand that these changes are challenging, and they were made with careful consideration. Yeah, I don't know about that. Looking ahead, we continue to... I'm sorry, that's just such obvious sucking up. Looking ahead, we continue to focus on offering more ways to play, more games across any screen.
Ooh.
Saying don't buy the Xbox, and providing value for Xbox players. So, yep, they raised prices again. Now Xbox Series X is $100 more expensive than a PS5, and that's the digital versions. If we talk about the disc versions, they are $200 apart. And the PS5 Pro is no longer the most expensive console. It is $50 cheaper than the Xbox Series X2 terabyte. Actually, if I pull up this one here, I want to pull up the chart. It's $800, isn't it? It is $800 for an Xbox Series X. What a joke. Even the Series S, whose only saving grace was price, now costs only $100 less than a proper console. The PS5, $450 for a Series S. My God. Just get a mini PC. It's stronger these days. So yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't know how else to read this other than Xbox is continuing its slide into irrelevance alongside the the ROG Xbox Ally X, which slaps on Xbox branding as an afterthought. The continued price increase for the actual console is making Xbox even less competitive than they had already been. Some price increases are warranted, but Sony has been aggressive, postponing their price rises as long as they could and doing them much more limited, like a $50 increase, not hundreds of dollars. If Xbox still wanted to compete, we have no doubt they could have done a more aggressive strategy, but they didn't, and therefore we don't think they do. So what do you think, Dan?
I don't have super extensive thoughts. I think when you first texted this to me, I said, wow, they really don't want people to buy these things, do they?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I feel like that's kind of the extent of my thoughts on this. Like, wow. I guess it doesn't matter. And like, I do somewhat mean it seriously. Maybe they just straight up don't care if people buy it anymore. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The write-up for this was like 90% written by Carbon Cry. And so, I usually glance at these, add my notes, but I don't always notice every little thing he will like. Carbon Cry will highlight, or should I say bold, parts that you might want to put emphasis on, because he's noticed that's how I write like a madman. But I think it works. And one of the things I didn't think about until this time that I read it is offering more ways to play, more games across any screen, providing value. I mean, that right there is, I think, a backhanded way or of saying, hey, if you don't like the price increase, don't buy an Xbox. So I think they're done. I stand. NX Gamer told me this, when he was recently on. It really, to me, does seem like they're not making Xboxes anymore, and they're just raising the price over time. They don't want you to buy them. But the amount at which $800 used to be $500 with a disc player, that's insane.
it definitely is insane. I mean, yeah. I don't know. It doesn't seem like they're making them, and they're just trying to eke out whatever money they can out of the remaining stock, I guess. I really don't know.
Or like they've manufactured a certain amount of dies, and whatever the cost increase is to assemble them and ship them, because they didn't probably stockpile them in the US before tariffs, they're just going to pass that along to the consumers and more, because they don't care anymore. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I mean, I just, there's no way. And I could recommend any Xbox console anymore. To the people that say we're Xbox haters, go buy your fucking $800 Series X if you think we're stupid. But this is our advice.
If I'm an Xbox hater, like, look at what this is. What's there to like, really? I mean, what, more canceled games? Like that's about it. That's what they have at this point.
I don't know. Yeah, it's bad. And for the Series S,
there are no redeeming qualities at this point to Xbox as a brand. Like, I'll just say it. Like,
you can play Gears of War on PlayStation now. I don't know.
I really don't know what there is to like praise about Xbox at this point.
Yeah, we'll see how next gen goes, but they really are starting from zero. I mean, I hope they compete, because that helps everybody. And frankly, I think a hybrid PC is what I've wanted them to make since the Xbox One. But so hopefully that will do well. But it really seems like they're starting from zero.
And going beyond hardware, they own a ton of software companies that I don't want to fail, because I like companies like Arcane, but I don't know. Or I should say studios, but I don't know.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I don't want any of their studios to fail. But then you see them kill the Hi-Fi Rush people after saying it succeeded, and I'm like,
Yep. Cool.
yeah, yeah. So the last thing I wanted to say is just the on the note of the Series S, it has no point. You don't get a Series S for Game Pass anymore. You get a mini PC, like
Well,
something like this, like not this one specifically, but a Series S is 4 teraflops of RDNA 2. You can get a 3.5 to 4 teraflop
you
Rembrandt APU mini PC now for like I think 300-400 bucks. It's cheaper to get a mini PC with Windows already installed, and sometimes they even come with 32 gigs of RAM now, or even 16. Turn down the textures, it'll run better than the Series S. Like, you, there's no point. Even if your argument is Game Pass, get a mini PC. Get a mini PC.
yeah,
Uh,
you get a Series S these days, Tom, because you have $450 in your wallet and those bills pissed you off for some reason. You need to get rid of them. Like that's why you
Actually,
buy a Series S.
let me do a shameless plug as well because I
Mm.
know they're a sponsor of mine. But if you want a mini PC, you can get I think this Ace Magic one for like certainly cheaper than a Series X, and has even a little dial to turn up the performance, which is kind of fun. Like something like this now, these are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. But yeah, so like even something with Hawk Point is $600 with 32 gigabytes of RAM and a terabyte. And I bring this up not just because it's sponsored, but because I did notice for the sponsorship that this is one of the cheaper ones. There it is. And if you remove, and then there's a Rembrandt version that goes down to $440. So that is also cheaper than a Series S. So it doesn't matter how you dice it. We're not even talking about getting, Rembrandt anymore. You can get Hawk Point, which is quite notably faster than a Series S. I tested it myself in something that is more than a Series S, but faster and cheaper than a Series X, or you can get something still better for less than a Series S. Just get a mini PC.
Yeah.
Like that's where we're at. I like it's just so weird to be able to fully pull our recommendation for the Series S, but once you start charging PS5 prices for it, I don't know what you expect from us. And yes, link will be in the description for that. And no, I did not try to shoehorn in an ad, by the way. I just thought, well, this is one of the better priced ones, so might as well put a link to it since they sent me one for testing. All right. Jensen Wang, all will be NVIDIA writes, and it says, having responded to the SteamOS Steam Deck problem, how long do you think it will take Microsoft to realize they will have to launch the Windows 11 Xbox/Game Edition as something you can install on any PC? Well, I don't know about you, Dan. I think that's the plan all along. I think the ROG Ally is a beta for their new OS, and then that's going to expand to everything over the next 5 years.
I mean, yeah, I could see it like that. That being the next way direction they pivot. Xbox as a brand, it's just like I don't know, a more cut down version of Windows, maybe optimized for gaming. Like if it is actually pared down and is you know uses fewer less resources, that could be fine.
Yeah. All right. Where's the next question here? No News writes in and says, could AMD expose a Sony-like API in their driver to get PS optimizations on Windows? If so, could they also add some of the PS blocks to their cards that could be accessed through this API? Sony may want to keep PC ports inferior to the PC Enough. No, there's no point where Sony's like, you better make the PC version run worse. Microsoft's not doing that. There's no point where they're like, you can't sell a GPU for a price because our console's this expensive. No, that's not how this works. Sony pays AMD to make them an APU, and then that's it. AMD's allowed to do whatever they want with everything else. So I keep seeing these conspiracies. That is not how this works. I've talked to people. No one says this has ever happened ever at AMD or Sony. But anyways, your question about like API. So no, the API thing, no. Like Carbon Cry wrote a whole thing. I'm just going to summarize it as no, they're not going to do that. As for the IP blocks in like the IO controllers, PS5 has. I will say I kind of surprised AMD hasn't added a audio controller like from the PS5. It wouldn't be the same thing, but similar. Or like a like shader compilation like part. Like I don't know why not. Like I think you could do that, wouldn't be in the PS5, but something to speed up shader compilation that's custom. My understanding, do you remember the name of the audio engine Tempest. There it is. The
Right.
Tempest 3D audio tech. I'm a little, from my understanding, the PS5 has an extra 37th compute unit that they modified to be a audio engine. It's a That means it takes up like 5-10 millimeters squared at most. Probably not even that. I'm kind of surprised they don't put that in their
Yeah.
gaming GPUs. Like that would be a marketing win over Nvidia, unless they think people will just look at frame rate and it won't matter. But what I will say is, would it be the exact things in the PS5? No. I am a little surprised they haven't added something for like DirectX IO, like loading, shader compilation, and audio. I'm a little surprised because at this point, I think you could add that stuff and it'd be a huge leg up on NVIDIA. Imagine that in Borderlands, half the issue is shader compilation stuff, as we'll get to. If AMD just didn't have that issue, I mean, that'd be a huge win.
Oh yeah, that would be.
So no, they're not going to take anything exactly from Sony, and Sony's not going to tell them to make it run worse so PS5 does better. But I continue to be surprised that AMD hasn't added something from the consoles. And who knows, maybe now with Xbox Magnus sharing dies with desktop, they will. We'll see. All right. Let me see here. Speaking of sharing tech with consoles, let us move on to story number 6. So FSR4 does work on RDNA too? Quoting from Notebook Check, if you own a Steam Deck, you can give FSR4 a shot by downloading and replacing a few .dll files in supported games. Deck Wizard on YouTube has uploaded a guide on how to run FSR4 on the Steam Deck. From downloading the required FSR4 files to integrating within supported games like Cyberpunk 2077, the process is super simple and takes just a few minutes. The video shows FSR4 running in Cyberpunk 2077 and Marvel's Spider-Man. The image quality improvement enabled by FSR4 is massive, but the performance takes a visible hit. However, you can go to performance mode and get similar performance to non-FSR4. So this is to be expected, by the way, that it does not run as well as RDNA 4, as there is hardware in RDNA 4 that speeds up a lot of these processes, but apparently not enough of them for it to not work at all on the older variants. Anyways, yep, we have finally seen FSR4 working firmly on RDNA 2. It does offer a lesser FPS benefit, but it clearly is superior to FSR2, FSR3, and even XE super sampling, which up until now was the favored way to go for visual quality with an upscaler if you're on a Steam Deck. Now look, this was possible before in the same way that people ran FSR4 and RDNA 3 in a few videos, but with AMD accidentally, this happened in, publishing 4 FSR4 code online before deleting it, some clever people were able to copy that code and modify it to enable straight DLL swaps for all FSR 3.1 games, as FSR 3.1 introduced the possibility of FSR DLL swapping, which worked on DLSS years ago, by the way. We don't have proper quantitative data yet. Steve, at Hardware Unbox, please test this. But anecdotal evidence of people who tried it is that while there is a performance hit, it is fully offset by the fact that you can run quality FSR4. You can get the same quality with FSR4. You can go to performance mode of FSR4, get the same frame rate as FSR3. And again, it's anecdotal. They say it still looks better than FSR3 quality mode. So hopefully this pushes AMD to release FSR4 to RDNA 2. After all, in the last loose ends, I leaked that AMD, at least the people I spoke to recently, had no plans to support FSR4 officially to RDNA 2. So if you ask me, this is where I get into the conspiracy theories. It almost to me feels like an annoyed AMD employee leaked this information to force Radeon's hand. Again, even if it ran half as well as 3, why not do it, AMD? This would be huge for so many APUs. But yeah, what did you think of this, Dan?
I mean, yeah, I hope this forces AMD's hand to release some version of FSR4 or whatever. What are they? Whatever they could call it for RDNA 2, because yeah, I mean, obviously a new way to increase visual quality is great, and hell, this is, I don't know how janky of an implementation of it. Maybe it still can offer some improvement in performance if they give it more official support or give like a pared down version that's more optimized for RDNA 2. So I hope that this forces their hand, and if not, I guess I don't know. Modifying game files, if you're following a guide, is pretty easy. So even if this remains in the realm of unofficial support, it's still something.
Yeah. I don't know that I have much else to add except that it's funny that how many times we've talked about all of this, and it's like now we just have it working.
Yeah.
Like it's like whatever AMD is claiming behind the scenes, and I believe it's still like. And again, who knows what we'll see? Maybe we'll see the variant of FSR4 for RDNA 3 have like a 1% performance hit versus on RDNA 4 and a 5% image quality hit, and that's the degree of quality they wanted to get to. And so, you know what I mean? That's what they that's why they're not putting it on 2, because they don't think they could get there. But even if RDNA 2 like takes another 10% hit and a 20% hit to performance, but you can still use FSR 4 to get a 10% boost in FPS with higher image quality, they should
Mm-hmm.
still do it. This is
Yeah.
still huge for the Steam Deck. Compressed AI Blocks writes in and says, I've always been okay with upscaling even before DLSS and FSR4, as long as it's done within reason and doesn't completely destroy the image. I feel with FSR4 and DLS4 we're at a place where it looks 95 to 98% of the image quality of native, or slightly better if you use things like native DLA. Do you guys think we're at a place where the average enthusiast, if that is even a thing, will finally accept upscaling? I feel so many people do not want to accept it, but the newest upscaling looks pretty damn good. It seems like it's finally... yeah. So my answer to this, by the way, Dan, is I think the average enthusiast has easily accepted this reality, and that it is an incredibly small vocal minority still complaining.
Oh yeah, that would be my guess. Is I mean, what people see another setting in game and they adjust it, and if it improves performance without too big of a hit in visual quality, people turn it on. If they don't accept it and it's like a bad implementation in a game, they don't use it. Like that's how I've been using FSR and FSR for years now. Like, and I think that's probably the way most people use it. I know there's a group of people that insist that they are not using it because they only want that true good native resolution. But if you can deliver me a version of a 4K that's uses an input resolution of 1080p and looks almost as good as 4K, I mean, wow, you extrapolated from 4x fewer pixels than what you're displaying to me, but if it looks good, it looks good.
Yeah.
You know?
So I don't know. That's my answer. I don't know any friend who complains about it. I don't have one. Not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that of like a dozen people, and then I think about their friends too. We go to dozens of people. I haven't ever heard someone bring up it being
Yeah,
bad.
I mean,
Like
it was
everyone just uses it. Even even FSR3 people are generally happy to use.
I mean, yeah, like DLSS 1 like 5 years ago was pretty meh, but that's
Oh yeah,
and early versions
and
of FS
DLSS one was useless.
and even and early versions of FSR were oof real bad sometimes, where that was just like, do you want your you're playing Spider-Man, do you want everything to look like a spider web? That's what FSR early implementations of FSR are. But
Wood writes in and says that 22% RDNA4 market share number. So for those who don't know, well, I was doing the last Loose Ends live stream. Someone at AMD heard me talking about market share and like, yeah, I don't really know what Radeon's at, but the earnings from AMD and Nvidia do not suggest they're at like 4%, whatever nonsense is being spread right now. And the person at AMD messaged me and said, we think gaming market share is at like 20-25%. Now, I can't get into the numbers too much, and I can't reveal like. I guess this was a company-wide presentation. I was told that actually today when I followed up with the person. This is a company-wide presentation, so I wish I had the numbers behind that so I could say like, are they just talking about do it yourself? Are they just talking, you know what I mean? Or like, is this desktop and they're not talking about laptop? That's kind of what I might suspect it is, but I don't know. But at least AMD's own internal numbers, they don't think they're at that low of a number. They disagree with the recent stuff out of John Petty openly. But the question Wood was going to ask is this just RDNA 4? And it's like, no. That's like total where they think they're at with gamers. That's what they think they're at. Jensen Wang, all will be NVIDIA, writes in yet again and says, if Radeon continues to make headway into regaining mindshare, do you think there's a chance they try to redefine what has become regeneration back to motion smoothing? I don't know, Dan. Do you? Because I gotta say, I hate frame generation. I really do. I think it sucks. I've tried it again with Battlefield 6.
mean,
I thought it was nonsense. Do you think there's a world where they just kind of stop talking about it again? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I could see a rebranding, I guess, of frame generation to something else. I don't know if they would want to go back to motion smoothing because I feel like motion smoothing is the discussion around that is like even a technology that people generally also don't like. And honestly, it's like if frame generation is like a reviled tech, feel like motion smoothing is like the thing everybody is like, why does this make TVs look like shit? And that's people's association with motion smoothing. So
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't think they would move back. I think they would try to find some other term for frame generation to slough off the ugly association it has with fake frames or whatever.
Yeah.
Or maybe like hardware accelerated motion blurring or some bullshit like that. I don't know. 'Cause that's
Yeah,
kind
AI
that
frame.
that's I think it's best implementation. That's truly what it is. Like I can't remember. It might have been hardware unboxed, but like a while ago with early implementations of frame generation, talking about it like that's kind of truly what it's a replacement for is a better version of motion blurring in its best form.
AI frame smoothing might work.
Yeah, that.
AI fluid frames. Oh,
Mm,
yeah. I mean, that's a much more honest marketing term than saying you're getting more frames because you're really not. And oftentimes it really lowers your performance, like because you have a capped frame rate. And so, like if I was getting, I have a 240 hertz monitor. If I was getting like 160 frames with my 4090, which I could in some maps with Battlefield 6, um, if I turn down enough of the CPU settings, that is. Um, and then I wanted to go to 240, it would then cap my real frames to 120, and it felt jankier.
yeah.
And then there was more latency added by having to generate the frames too, and so it actually more felt like 100 frames a second. It was so it's like it's not performance. It really isn't. And then there's AI hallucinations everywhere.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, yeah. My experience with frame generation is pretty similar. Where I actually do think I prefer just native 60 over at least in a lot of the
yeah,
games I used. I preferred native 60 over 120 frame gen. Like it just made me feel sick and like Deep Rock Galactic.
yeah. The only game where it seemed okay was Hogwarts Legacy. Um, but again, I was in an area that was early in the game, like
Yeah, I remember that looking okay.
but that was the green, not Green Gots, whatever the bank is, where you go like on the roller coaster through the
Yeah,
bank.
yeah.
Like there wasn't that much stuff moving in a weird way there, so that would be like an ideal place for that. Um, anyways, though, uh, Jensen Wing writes in again and says, "How do you feel about the wonderful Borderlands optimization guide at 1080p with 4x multi-frame gen? A 5090 gets well over 60 frames." Yeah, well, for the final story here, I did actually want to touch on Borderlands 4 again. So yeah, I felt like we need to touch on this again after seeing the Digital Foundry testing that confirms that consoles basically have just as many issues as PC, besides probably having fewer crashes. Although this also came out, this will be in the wrap up, that crash increase may be because, and this is coming out from Gearbox, of Intel instability with 13th and 14th gen,
Woot
saying
woot.
that they are finding a disproportionate amount of crashes on Intel systems. Again, do not buy Raptor Lake. But yeah, let me see. Let me go through this write up of all of the issues, kind of summarizing our opinion on Borderlands 4 right now. It does seem that Borderlands 4 and the already long infamous Randy Pitchford are the gift that keeps on giving, which is giving migraines, that is, as gamers suffer from ridiculously low frame rates, frequent stutters, and having to keep remembering to reload the game every hour or so to keep their frame rates high. We did some initial analysis of Borderlands 4 on a die shrink. Subscribe to the Moore's Laws at Patreon, by the way, to get all of that. But now we have some more information from Digital Foundry that found many of the issues persist even on consoles. Both consoles, that is Xbox and PlayStation, show performance degradation after about the 30 minutes of playtime mark. And Xbox also shows stutters in screen tearing, implying there is an issue on the Xbox side with shader compilation, meaning Gearbox couldn't even get the game to a playable state. Well, I disagree. It is playable, but get it to a reasonable state for just 4 fixed SKUs. To us, that is shocking, negligent, and perhaps Sony and Microsoft should up their standards to catch some technically immaturity before games taint the reputation of their products in the future. You see, here's the point, though. Borderlands 4 is not just Unreal Engine 5 not working, by the way. That's now abundantly clear. It's also not just developer incompetence or bugs. It's all of the above. We see that as people were able to eliminate stutters on PC by expanding shader compilation cache to 100 gigabytes on their SSD. That implies that the devs seemingly didn't optimize the shader compilation at all. The performance degradation seen in longer play is also not a Unreal Engine 5 issue. This is not something you see in all of the Unreal Engine 5 games. It's, again, a Borderlands 4 issue, and all of those caused by Gearbox, compounded on top of Unreal Engine 5's weaknesses, an engine that is heavy, demanding, and difficult to tame, and Gearbox seemed to put no effort at all into taming it. So what's our overall conclusion now that the dust has settled from decent amounts of testing? First of all, yes, PC overall runs worse, relatively speaking, compared to console, but that's mostly just perception and due to whatever dynamic resolution tech the console versions are using, as they seem to be very good at hiding how low the resolution is when the action gets going crazy. Like I saw that in the menu system, the PS5 Pro is often running full 4K, and like when you're close up on something, it is full 4K, but it makes it easy to not notice in crazy scenes. It might even drop to 900p down, which is crazy because it doesn't look not sharp to me, but it's doing a good job of handling that. But that means if it was well optimized, this thing would probably look fantastically more sharp on all console versions. Second, the console versions should be rated at higher resolutions than they are, just like PC. And frankly, the lack of official PlayStation 5 Pro support or any real use of PSSR or FSR 3.1 on the Xbox or other PlayStation console is ridiculous. So overall, what we would say is console gamers shouldn't brag too much about it running better on console. It kind of does, but only kind of. Third, the discoveries of the shader cache issues and performance over time degradation points to this not at all being Unreal Engine 5, or at least that's not the only issue. Yes, Unreal Engine 5 can have performance issues, but honestly, most of these problems at this point seem like a Gearbox problem. And finally, then on that last point, that's actually kind of good news long term. Were it to be the case that we learn something like Unreal Engine 5 just can't do this type of graphics well, then there wouldn't be much in the room for fixing this with patches. But slowly learning that this seems to be a Gearbox problem, despite Randy Pitchford claiming the opposite before recently backtracking and say there will be patches finally. Good news.
Oh, wow. Good job.
Then we would have been screwed. But now that we know that this game probably should have launched in November in a far more polished state, although I'm sure that was due to them being worried it shouldn't be within even 6 months of the GTA 6 release, by the way, I think now we can probably expect large performance patches that will actually improve things a lot in the future. Again, it seems like a Gearbox problem, and it seems like one that even modders are starting to be able to fix on their own. Therefore, I think patches will probably have large performance improvements
Fix most of
on
the
all
issues,
consoles
at least.
moving forward. Yeah. So that's good to know it's not Unreal Engine 5, although Unreal Engine 5 can have issues. Seems like Gearbox did literally nothing to make this game run well before launch, besides make it not crash a lot on console. Didn't do that on PC, though.
I mean, yeah, release your games in a finished state. And if you're not going to release your game in a finished state, don't yell at your fans on Twitter for a week and a half straight, Randy. That's stupid.
I mean, I already put out a short telling him to shut up. I don't have anything else to say beyond that. Randy's made a lot of great games. He's apparently behind a lot of the technical decisions of some consoles even. So the guy's smart, but I got to say...
Big fan of a lot of his games. Love the Borderlands series. But
I got to say what we've seen here was just stupid. And the game should have come out in November, and it would have been fine in November. What would have been competing with it? But I think they launched it as early as they could to avoid not just GTA 6, but competing with the new Dying Light and other open world games coming out.
Yeah.
And I'm of two minds about it because me and you and our friend Brock have been having a blast playing this game. I played it again last night. The thing they've nailed, that this is the best loot cycle they've ever come up with, and the best guns in all of the Borderlands games. By far, they're the most fun guns to shoot. I would just say that, look, it probably should have waited at least a month. And when you see people, and who knows, I'll take whatever I can get. I've got 100 gigabytes free on my PS5 Pro, but if they have an option on 100 gigabyte buffer, give me that option then. Give it on PC, and that would just be a Band-Aid. There should still be a giant patch for PC that fixes and optimizes things and also optimizes things a bit on console, but then also hopefully adds some form of FSR to Xbox, adds PSSR to PS5 Pro, adds FSR to base PS5. There's so many things they could have done to optimize performance better. It just doesn't seem like it seems like the game was ready to go gold before the polish state, and they just never did any polishing. They did polishing for it to run and for most things to work, especially, but they didn't polish the performance end at all. It seems that's what it seems like.
And I can't remember how baked into Unreal Engine or how much of an issue with this is with just the game itself, but they need to fix the RAM leakage issue. Obviously, I think that's the most fatal flaw, at least in consoles.
Yeah. So. Yep, there it is. I guess we know what's wrong, and I would still say, if you're a huge Borderlands fan, I still say you should get it if you want to play with your friends.
Yeah.
Just know that you should have a console or something stronger than a 9060 XT, and just know on the 9060 XT or even a 5060, as we saw, you're probably going to be doing 1080p 60 or 1440p 60 with DLSS or FSR turned on. If you're in a 5080, no, you're not going to be doing 4K 120 like you should be. You're going to be doing 4K 80 with a mix of settings that are optimized, 4090, 4K 100. If you really optimize your settings, not 4K 200 like it probably should be. And hopefully that'll be fixed. But that is still playable. I still would push back that it's not playable, at least on console. I can't say if the crashing is that bad on PC. I believe they put out a patch though where I already saw like Hardware Unbox say the crashing issue seems to have been pretty much solved. So it is playable. It's just not at all optimized. It really isn't, and there should be more patches. Because if you're someone with a 5080 or a PS5 Pro, it's playable. But there's a significant amount of people that I would say would get to the point where it's not playable. I mean, if you have a 3060, it's borderline not playable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and they need to fix that. And it's just so tired of this type of crap happening. All right. Let's now move on to the wrap up. This is the final stories that we did not think deserved a full conversation, but did deserve a mention. First, Switch 2 cards are ridiculously slow. I don't know if you saw this, but developers they've already told me this behind the scenes and I've said it, but they're talking about the fact that yes, some Switch 2 games let you run the game off of the cartridge, but it's 400 megabytes per second. My God, they've cheaped out here. I guess 400 megabytes a second is actually pretty fast for some SD cards. But I don't know. I'm of two minds about it, On the one hand, I think it's pathetic that they charge so much for the game key cards when they're not worth that much. On the other hand, I will say this is how Blu-ray works on the PS5. Just plain devil's advocate. You put it in,
true.
It installs the game. That's just what they moved to with Switch 2.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, maybe maybe some it's just outdated but whatever. But yeah, I mean that's not a bad point.
The dumbest thing is the price Nintendo charges for these key cards, where they don't even have the game on the card to install. You then have to download it anyways. That is where we get to just silly levels. What is the point here? Techno writes in, why doesn't Nintendo not only use faster flash storage, but mandate that consumers only buy SD Express or UHS full lane, which means blah, blah, blah. So like 1.2 gigabit per second, a greater minimum that would probably allow you to run the same games. Cost. I mean, a Blu-ray is what, cents to make? Probably. I think $1. Yeah. I don't know what it is. And to make a 1.2 gigabyte per second SD card, I mean, I'm sorry, I especially one that's probably like 32 gigabytes or something. What? You're looking at like $10 at least? That cuts into the margins quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
We have early, I guess this isn't a review, but from friend of the show, The Fox, which, by the way, let me say that The Fox is going to be the next guest on Broken Silicon. So he'll be able to talk about the PS6 handheld with authority, what he thinks about it, at least I should say, and talk about the Strix Halo handhelds with authority and what all of these leaks for upcoming APUs mean. So make sure you're subscribed to Moore's Law is Dead on Patreon. Even at the lowest level, you could ask The Fox questions. But he did some early testing of Strix Halo. And honestly, he seems pretty impressed, and I like the size of it. It seems to work well.
Yeah, it looks nice to me.
The most interesting thing is, though, and it's both impressive in that when you get down to like 45 watts, is that's about where Strix Halo is kind of at its efficiency peak. It gets more performance the higher you go,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's pretty low for 40 compute units and 16 cores. But if you go down to like 25 watts and try to have a long battery life, it doesn't seem too much stronger than Strix Point,
Okay.
which I guess isn't all that
Not a
surprising.
shocker. Yeah.
But I think that then informs why they went with what they did. They're like, well, we're going to need to give this as much room for cooling as possible by removing the battery. So it's just massive fans flowing through it. And we're going to have swappable batteries because if this thing isn't running at 45 watts, which would only give you like a 1 hour battery life, then
What's
it
the
doesn't
point?
really have a point over Strix
Yeah.
Point. And he's
Yeah.
excited to test the 32 compute unit 385 model, which, yeah.
The one thing I'll say is like, yeah, he says he likes the external battery thing, and it's an interesting design, especially being able to hot swap it. But
it doesn't
looks
look
like
too bulky though.
it does look to me like it could have a similar issue like the 360 controller had with those external batteries, where like it just gets in the way of your hands.
If you have
Although
big
it looks
hands.
like the Fox has relatively big hands, and if he likes it, it'll probably be fine for most people.
Yeah, that's one of those things where I'd have to hold it myself to know. But yeah, so
Yeah.
excited to have him on. And yeah, I mean, there's a handheld. This is a much more interesting handheld to me, by the way.
It's more interesting than I initially thought it would be, too. Like, I was a little worried this thing would be kind of stupid, but now that I'm actually seeing someone hold it, it looks nice, I think.
Me too. Wouldn't you say, too, if the Xbox is $900 and the 385 variant with 32 compute units, so double, and 8 full Zen 5 cores is, instead of like 3 plus 5, is like $1,200, wouldn't you spend the extra 30% to get this?
Probably, yeah.
I mean, now you're doing ultra gaming, maxed out on the, like, you could, it's 1080p 120 screen. You're maxing out that screen with this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once you spend over $600 on a handheld, I feel like you just have the money to get the best, and it's not 2,000. I would just go for this over that Xbox easily. Although we'll have to see what OS it gets. Although I think he just runs Linux on it anyways, or like SteamOS, because that runs better. RX 7700 16 gigabyte silently announced. So this is cut down Navi 32 RDNA 3 from 60 to 40 compute units. I think this is them dumping the remaining yields.
Sure.
But
yeah.
We don't have a price yet, but it is interesting. If it was like $399, well, would even that actually wouldn't be very good. Let me actually, what would they price this at? 10 tech power
330, hopefully. I don't know.
Right, because the 9060 XT is almost as fast as a 7700 XT. So yeah, $299. I don't know what this would be.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess that's what you would want to go for. I don't know. We'll see. Another weird release by AMD, but I'm glad it's more than 12 gigabytes. I have this note called "Another Moore's Law is Dead" leak confirmed. This is the that the N1 laptop processor is a variant of GB10. Told you guys, it's not a different thing. I leaked a picture of it too. Gerard can throw up the thumbnail for it. This is a skunk. I genuinely believe the laptop version was having tons of issues with software. So then they launched an AI only variant that doesn't run Windows because they could get that out sooner. I really do think that's what happened. Nvidia banned from China by China. This kind of came out of nowhere here. That the Chinese government said to their companies, which they can just do that, much like the U.S. government's trying to do now. I guess now we're communists. I don't understand I thought we were against that, but they're just saying you can't buy Nvidia chips and a tit for tat with the U.S. From what I've heard, this has thrown Nvidia through a loop, and I don't know.
Curious if that hurts China more than it helps it, given how far behind they are in this technology. But I guess go for it.
Well, when you are a communist country, sometimes you can just think long term and think this is for the best and say, if you feel pain, suck it, nerds. But sometimes that leads to the greatest famines we've seen in history. So we don't know how this one will turn out for them. But yeah, this is a big deal, actually. I don't know how much I really have to say about this besides this hurts Nvidia. And this is a way for them to get back, I guess, at Trump saying that you can sell to China, but we get a cut. And they're saying, nope, no cut. So I don't know what to make of this one, because actually, if I pull up my Nova Lake leak, I believe that is set to use TSMC 2 nanometer, across the board. And TSMC just announced their first 2 nanometer customers, and they mentioned AMD, Nvidia, Apple, and MediaTek. There's no mention of Intel.
Interesting.
I don't know what to make of that. The only thing I would say is maybe Venice. What does it say? Tape out April 2025 mass. Maybe and
Maybe they're
Intel's
later.
wave 2. Like maybe AMD is going to be able to get Venice out mid next year. Probably late. I don't know. Maybe Nova Lake is just they don't consider it one of the first. I don't know, or we'll see. But that's something to watch. That's weird because I have it on good authority. They're using TSMC 2 nanometer and they want to launch Nova Lake by late next year. It's so funny whenever we see delays. We're like, well, what does this mean for the other company? And half the time we just learned the other company got delayed too. Who knows? Maybe Nova Lake and Zen 6 desktop will become like December or January launches. We'll see. We already covered the Borderlands 4 thing. All right. Final reader mails, everybody. So, Bullethead writes in and says, here's a fun story about Intel face planting on the esports scene. Speaking of crashing, an interesting addition to the discourse has been added by streaming consultant JJ Liebig, who claims that 3 out of 5 i9 14900K machines they were using for observer purposes at the Esports World Cup crash roughly every 4 hours. Jesus. It turns out the chips already had degraded to the point that we had to use backup systems. Well, we were live on air, they claimed. I'll build my own observer machine and ship them next year for that event. So again, very guys, cool. I feel like this comes up every few months. Like, wait, what's going on with Raptor Lake instability? First Borderlands 4, now this. I don't know. Still seems like it's a huge issue, and you really should not buy Raptor Lake stuff, guys. Don't buy it. It is not fixed. It can't be fixed. It has a fatal flaw. It just can be prolonged in how long it takes to break. Another Chris writes in, MLID Wiki would be pretty sick. We could finally have vetted info that we could quickly share with people about upcoming things and give them a potential reason to wait on buying things. Also, just general references without having to rewatch videos would be pretty cool. Honestly, man, this would have to become a thing.
It would take a lot of work, I think.
Maybe in 10 years if we have a team of 5 people, some full.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I that'd be just so much work, and there's so many little pieces of nuance, and they're always constantly changing. You basically have to have some of our biggest fans paid to constantly update things based on every little thing I say. But then it would also take up my time because they'd have to ask me about it. I'd have to think, is that really what I would want to put? Because you have to separate speculation from actually knowing something. I just don't think that's in the cards. Pun not intended. Planet 9 writes in, Tom, have you been affected by the recent YouTube algorithm changes lowering viewership? Yes, I believe it screwed a few of my videos. I do. And I think it was also linked to that thing where they auto-dubbed videos. And I didn't realize that meant if you speak another language natively, that it might auto-play me with a female French voice, and then you might click away from a video. Yeah, I mean, Linus Tech Tips ranted about this for an hour, yeah. So that's why the Patreon's so important. I mean, please join the Patreon, guys. We've been affected pretty badly in the past 2 months, despite having some of the biggest leaks. I'd say the biggest leaks of this channel's history, actually, at the PS6 and some other stuff.
Yeah, YouTube really likes randomly taking away views for some reason. So it's one of their favorite things.
But it's actually hurt the channel quite a bit the past few months. Again, Patreon's there. The Fox will be the next guest. Lowest tier can ask some questions. Higher tiers get access to a Discord, the ability to ask questions for die shrinks, die shrink episodes multiple times a month. Higher tiers get access to free questions for the loose ends, questions on all pieces of content, and early ad-free Broken Silicon. And higher tiers get even more. So please support us there. On that note, Dan, I think that is going to do it for this episode. Do you have any final words?
I don't think so.
Well, like I said, subscribe to the Patreon, subscribe to Moore's Law on YouTube, ring the bell button, comment down below, share it, and as always, also subscribe to the Broken Silicon on your podcast app of choice and give us a review there. Check out the sponsors below. Click on those links in the description. And have Have a good rest of your week, everybody. Thanks for watching and listening.
Goodbye.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carmen Cry and Carrie Nosugad as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the About/support page in the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Carrie Nosugada as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and Jean-Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong, we love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guest questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes and Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit, and give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels: Brad Medlin, Drita Full, Z Jits, Daniel D, Nicholas Buckner, Aaron Close, Jan Rauner, Toka, MJB1, Daniel Hyde, GZ Ziggy, SNES Chalmers, Jem Ferriero, Valkamalev, Compressed AI Blocks, Jensen Wang, All Shall Be Nvidia, Gregor Zacher, Sarcastro, Chris Rich, Evan Dingle, Hal Booma, Shredbird, Semi Malas, Chris Curry, King 3, Crescenthinos, The Boss Haas, Tommy, Jonathan, Jake223, Jake Martin, Slicky, Amiable Chief, Gamers Unite, I Should, Meat and Pork, Ian Clifford, Tim Robb, Travis Gooding, Zoot Suit Taylor, Mads, Patty Cakes, Greg, Michael McGee, Stephen Coates, Mark Mitchell, James Anderson, Winwing, Mark Raidmaker, Cole Addict, Henry Zhang, Wesley Sager, Cameron, Michelle Pell, Hexapuma, Teak Autumn, Reginald Ari, Windstar, Little Germany, James I. Raider, Shay, Milton, Brett Jones, Chuck Glidden, Stephen Dick, Matt Daffy, Justin Bustle, Austin Haggerty, Joe Foot, John Swin, Brian Scanlon, Harlan, Joseph Kelly, Jansen, Angima, Slushbob, Brian Wright, Sisyphos7771, The Forbidden Juice, RB Racer, Thalo215, Alex Vega, Michael Cozy, Crystal Joe, Solarize80, Elbergun, Kikom, Sprutnik, Brian P, Hudat42, Cornster671, Penta Winta, State Farm Snake, Matthew Cassells, Hal Richard, Omega Doge, Hugo Ander Kiwi, Mr. Tiger, John Wick Boomstick, Penguins Love AI, Porcelain Oats, Nick Zuzmania, AI Soldier 789, Bespoke exclamation point, Smash Axley, Karim El Masri, Daniel Martigano, Fred Berger, Rye Hill She Bowles, Kevin Kuntz, Magnolis Ragkusis, Armand Vakatura, Jonathan Harris, Kalan Reichel, Elusive Man, Kainush Kagani, Johnny Trans, Zubar Ahmed, Borntoff, Chuna, Josh, Abigail Schiff, Arkeo RK0, Penguins from NKVD, Angel of Cake, And of course, thank you to Sahara for the music, and thank you for listening to me stumble through this while I was very tired.